In the lead up to WrestleMania 5, the Mega Powers exploded because Randy Savage looked over at Hulk Hogan, looked at Elizabeth, looked back at Hulk Hogan and said, "You got lust in your eyes for Elizabeth. Yeah, I see how you're looking at her, Hulk Hogan. Lust Hogan will be taken down. History beckons the Macho Man." Randy Savage would continue to snap and snap and snap years before he snapped into it. Yeah. And unfortunately, Randy Savage's anger, rage, and frustration with Lust Hogan would cost him the WWF Championship at WrestleMania 5, ending just over a year as WWF Champion. Even though Hulk Hogan was in his shadow, lording over him, wouldn't let Randy Savage have the proper run that he could have, facing off against so many goddamn people, so many great opponents, and having a much more memorable reign, even though Randy Savage was always better than Hulk Hogan and should have had a longer run. He lost the championship, but what if Randy Savage had found a way to win at WrestleMania 5, extended his reign to 400 days, 500 days, 600 days, 5 million days? Yeah, I'll retire as champion. I'll lose it when I want to, and I don't want to lose it. What if Randy Savage had retained at WrestleMania 5? That's what I'm here to talk about. I'm John Rentham with What If Randy Savage Had Won at WrestleMania 5. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, please. Yeah, I came back with another what if. Other people suggested subjects for what if as far as in the comments of previous what if videos, and there are some I don't think I'm going to be able to get to. Not that I don't appreciate the feedback, not that I don't appreciate the suggestions, but I tried to work on some of them. This is the only one that I came up with where I was like, yeah, this is something I could dive into. Yeah, okay, I got to stop doing the Randy Savage impression. So basically, if you're unfamiliar with the what if concept, I go through a little bit of brief history, what led up to the match, and the result of that, but then what could have happened afterwards. And this one's pretty interesting because you had Randy Savage, from humble beginnings, working for years and years, working in ICW after working for the Sheik and a couple other promotions. And then all that stuff happened. He rose to prominence as being one of the biggest superstars of all time. A character, a tremendous wrestler, a tremendous promo, a great PR man for the company. And you had Hogan, who had been champion for a while. After his humble beginnings in the territories, AWA and all that stuff. So instead of going all the way back to like the territory days and going into minute detail, I'll basically say Randy Savage had his run in baseball. He had busted his arm and learned how to throw with the other arm, but he couldn't make it in baseball. So he got in the family business because Angelo Poffo had been a journeyman wrestler, but also a popular wrestler holding the sit-up record, I believe. Lanny Poffo had gotten into wrestling as well. Randy worked for the Sheik. They worked in other promotions. Naturally, you could see how Randy Savage, from those beginnings, would be somebody that promoters would want to bring in, because looking at Randy, even the early pictures, you could see he was going to be somebody. He was still trying to find himself. He hadn't become, the Macho Man yet. I mean, he would start doing the promos in ICW, and ICW, International Championship Wrestling, was what Angelo Poffo decided to do, running in parts of Kentucky that Jerry Jarrett didn't run in. And they did pretty well in, some of those areas, but they were able to sustain for a while because they were a small operation. But unfortunately, they kept promoting that they were going to face off against Memphis guys. That didn't work. That's a brief history of it. There's podcasts out about it that go into much more detail than me. And ICW closes down. He was possibly going to go to Mid-South, but because of an earlier incident with Bill Dundee, breaking Bill Dundee's jaw, and then having other skirmishes, Bill Dundee was going to go be the booker in Mid-South. Couldn't work together. Either Dundee couldn't work with Savage, Savage couldn't work with Dundee, or both. One or the other. Because Bill Watts had been talking about on Mid-South TV, bringing Randy Savage, and Lanny Poffo was appearing, that kind of stuff. Angelo had already stepped out of the ring by that point. And because of that, Randy went to Memphis and faced off against Jerry Lawler, and they did some good business there, and Randy was earning more money than he'd ever earned in ICW. He probably earned more in the one or just over a year run in Memphis than he ever earned in ICW. I mean, I would say combined, but he always lived very modestly. And that was something that he got from Angelo Poffo, who was always good about pinching a penny to the point that you could actually squeeze Lincoln's hairpiece off. I don't think Lincoln had a hairpiece, but I'm going to roll with it. And then he goes to the WWF. He instantly works with Hogan on the house shows and on some television tapings, and always count out victories. Hogan's the champion at this point, almost ready to enter the 2-year mark of his just over 4-year run, 4 years and 2 weeks, I believe, something like that. And he's working with Hogan. He has Elizabeth, his wife, as his valet. Continues to just get over and over. Obviously, people, they're booing Randy Savage, but they appreciate his ability. And Tito Santana was Intercontinental Champion heading into early '86. And then Randy, with a loaded punch, won the Intercontinental Championship in February of '86. Then feuded with George Steele. That was certainly a match. George Steele at that point was pretty much broken down. And he did the whole thing where it's like, he was going after Elizabeth, not in a mean way, not in a creepy way, even though it was kind of creepy. But that was something that angered Randy. You don't touch Elizabeth. And this was true to life. There were people that would look at Elizabeth and Randy wouldn't appreciate that. Liz was a beautiful woman. I still wish Liz was around now. We know why she isn't. And we know who was part of the cause of it. But feud with George Steele. He was Intercontinental Champion. He was having great matches. Saturday Night's Main Event on the house shows, all that, on television tapings. And then he feuded with Ricky Steamboat. Did the double axe handle to the floor. Got his, got the throat dealy, just jamming his throat in there. Ricky's having to learn how to speak again. And then we had the match with Bruno, or he had the match with Bruno, I think in like February or March of '87. That was in a tape. It was either Pittsburgh or I think it was Pittsburgh. But feud with Bruno, and I would think of it as like Bruno's last hurrah, because I think Bruno moved into full-time commentary after that. Because Bruno was upset about how much of a piece of shit, basically, Randy was. And then, of course, the iconic, most talked about Intercontinental Championship match in WrestleMania history against Ricky Steamboat. You could argue the greatest, or at least one of the greatest matches in WrestleMania history. And then, he would lose the title there. Steamboat would lose the title to Honky because Butch Reed allegedly did not show up. Butch Reed as champion would have been better. He wouldn't have held as long as Honky, but we wouldn't have had that undeserving idiot as champion. And then he's feuding with Honky into '87. I believe it was October of '87. It was a Saturday Night's Main Event. And Hogan stops Randy from getting further beaten down. Sort of. Kind of. Maybe. It was, I think, Honky and the Hart Foundation, if I recall correctly. There was the guitar, the guitar shots, drawing more of a dime than Jeff Jarrett did. No, actually, no, I think Jeff Jarrett might have drawn more dimes than Honky. And he never drew any, so there you go. Honky drew negative dimes somehow. And then we build up, the Mega Powers. Rumble 88, the first Rumble. Hogan losing the championship to Andre the Giant at the big event. 33 million people fucking watching that. And then the title's vacated because he gave it to Ted DiBiase. Jack Tunney's like, that's not going to fly. So we get a tournament to crown a new champion. The entire tournament of the concept for WrestleMania 4. And a Battle Royal, and I think a Tag Team Championship match, and there were probably 2 other matches I'm forgetting. It was a long, long, long night. They probably should have had a few matches take place on like a Saturday Night's Main Event or something before, and then build to that, and maybe you could have cut a little bit of the runtime off of that. But nevertheless, Randy goes through a bunch of people. Ted DiBiase gets a bye. And Hogan ends up, being the good guy, hitting Ted with a chair while the referee's distracted. I mean, Andre, to be fair, had been interfering, but still. So yeah, Hogan had to do that and have the limelight and point to Randy. He's like, don't worry, Randy's the guy. No, I don't want to be the guy. That's not why I'm here in the ring and getting a little handsy with Elizabeth. And Hogan coveting another man's wife. Well, it's a good thing he's never done that, especially on video. So, Hogan wanted the limelight. SummerSlam 88 main event against Ted and Andre and the Mega Bucks. And you had that, you had Liz looking great. And then the Mega Powers, they built there, but there's tension. There was the 89 Rumble where Hogan accidentally eliminated Randy, and Hogan didn't win that thing. Big John Studd won the 89 Rumble, believe it or not. And then we go to the Saturday Night's Main Event, I believe in February of 89. Randy was having a match. It was Randy and Hogan, I think they were having a tag match against somebody, and I'm kind of drawing a blank literally on who it could have been. It could have been Ted and Andre for all I know. They could have been doing a rematch. But they did something where Randy was left alone. He got knocked on Liz. Hogan carried her to the back. He's all upset. Liz, with a concussion and CTE and all that, go help Randy. So he does. And Savage is pissed because he put his hands on his wife. And also Lust in Your Eyes. Liz is all upset in the back. Savage potatoes Hogan, beats the shit out of him, and that's what we get to, that's where we get to WrestleMania 5. Where Hogan, the baby face, the guy that put his hands on another man's wife and coveted her, won at WrestleMania 5, ending Randy Savage's, I believe, 372 day reign as champion. And then Hogan, after just about 14 months, after losing a championship, maybe not even quite, he won it again. Then he held it for another year. So yeah, that was some bullshit. So let's get to Hogan. Hogan, AWA stuff, he worked in Alabama, worked and all that. AWA stuff, Vern didn't put the title on him, all that bullshit. Covered that. What if Hogan had never left the AWA? He debuted in late 83. Backlund instantly lost the championship when Vince knew Hogan was coming in. And then he won the championship from the Iron Sheik a month later, January 23rd, 1984. He was a touring champion, and he was having good matches. Good for Hogan, at least. He mostly did big man stuff. He was allowed to do a lot more in Japan. But you had Slaughter. He was a big baby face, feuding with the Sheik. Jimmy Snuka, until he self-destructed. After, months after murdering Nancy Argentino. By the way, that's something that he did. He murdered Nancy Argentino. And that is something that will never be forgotten. I'll never forget it. And I always remind people that Jimmy Snuka was a fucking murderer. Because, guess what? Plenty of wrestlers have done a lot of shit things. Snuka continued to work because Vince paid off the goddamn police. And you will not convince me otherwise. So, Rock and Wrestling Connection, feud of Piper, association with Mr. T, get to WrestleMania 1. And that's the tag team main event. Piper and Orndorff with Bob Orton in the corner against Hogan and Mr. T with Jimmy Snuka in the corner. And then Orndorff turns face after that. They team up for a bit into 86. And then Orndorff turns on Hogan because he's fucking pissed at him. They have the big old show in Chicago. This is after the Mania 2 match with Bundy, by the way. Bundy. The Ernie Ladd impression. The Toronto Stadium show that convinced Vince, as it were, that WrestleMania 3 should be in the Silver Dome. And it was. It drew 93,173 people. But before that, Saturday Night Main Event cage match against Paul Orndorff, where they both dropped out at the same time. I am convinced Orndorff won. But nevertheless, they weren't going to end it with the fact that Andre was going full-on heel. The Slam heard around the world. And Union with Savage in 87. Loses the championship, all the stuff I talked about, with the Randy Savage piece. And then Hogan was, feuding with other people, teaming up with Randy. They were doing this stuff. And yes, it was a well-told story. I'm not even saying that I don't understand why Vince went this way and that you couldn't go with the idea of the babyface winning. But the fact is, Hogan didn't need the championship after 4+ years as champion. He could have had the championship for 3 goddamn years. Andre could have beat him. That would have been a mistake because Andre couldn't move. But the whole point is, all this, the dissolvement, all this crap going on. Now, let's talk about what could have possibly happened at WrestleMania 5. In the lead-up, obviously, Hogan would be pissed at Savage because Savage had done what he had done. He had snapped. He had totally snapped. Now, Savage could have still maintained being a heel, paranoid, all that, and beaten him. He could have won via DQ. There could have been some interference, a distraction, to lead Hogan in another direction, to feud with maybe Ted DiBiase, feud with somebody. You could have done that, and that could have led Savage to feud with some other baby faces. You had Bret Hart, who was coming up as a babyface. I mean, granted, he was still teaming with Jim Neidhart. Those could have been good matches. He could have had matches with Shawn Michaels. He could have faced Hercules. I laugh, but Hercules could have delivered some good matches there. Beefcake, as much as I laugh, he was over at that point. Tito Santana. I mean, Martel had turned heel, the Strikeforce split and everything at Mania 5. You could have had Martel cost Tito on the next Saturday night's main event or something like that, tying back to their Intercontinental Championship match. And then you would have had something to carry Tito and Martel for a while. It would have made sense. It would have intermingled Savage. Sure, you might argue it could devalue the championship, but at the same time, think about it. Savage could have been the touring champion, still worked in Japan, still done some stuff. He could have worked Hogan on the house shows. And Hogan's opponent could have come in, Ted DiBiase, whatever. You still could have had people in the mix. You could have had him. You could have Savage feud with Warrior. Warrior had lost the Intercontinental Championship, would win it from Rick Rude at SummerSlam '89. You could have built that up, and then you could have led to Mania 7 eventually when they would have had it with a little more history, in my personal opinion. There are other baby faces he could have competed against. Bruno was retired by that point. Superstar Billy Graham, his hip was goddamn mulch. Fuck Superstar Billy Graham, by the way. Piece of shit. Big of a draw as he was. Ronnie Garvin. Rugged Ronnie Garvin against Randy Savage. Because Savage could have lost it. The SummerSlam tag match could have still happened just with Randy as champion. And with Zeus. And Zeus could have lost. And you still would have had something going. Because you could have had Hogan and Beefcake. And they could have been gunning for the title there. You could have had tension between those two, even though a feud between them would never have done anything, and it's a good thing no company like WCW ever had them Starrcade 94. The worst Starrcade ever. So, he could have lost it on a big Saturday night's main event in October, tying back 2 years after they had formed, and Randy finally snapped. Big moment. Hogan wins because Hogan didn't need another year-long run. Or, what you could have done... Because Hogan, honestly, yes, Hogan and Warrior created goddamn magic. I'm just blue skying, doing a whole bunch of fantasy booking here. But what if you had Hogan against, say, Earthquake at Mania 6? And you had Hercules against somebody else. And you had a moment where the Canadian Earthquake, and because John Tenta, the late great John Tenta, check out the Dark Side of the Ring episode on him if you haven't, and check out my review of that. If, say Tenta had taken out Hogan there... Big moment. Warrior is the Intercontinental Champion, Savage as the WWF Champion. What would Dusty have done? They would have found something for Dusty to do. You still could have done title for title. Warrior could have won, and then you could have had the thing where Savage tries to get his win back, and you go to WrestleMania 7. You do the retirement match. I'm just saying that after the first 5 Manias, if Hogan hadn't been in the main event of Mania 6. Sure, it might have pissed some people off, but let's blue sky it here. Tell me that Randy Savage couldn't have gotten a great match out of Ultimate Warrior. He did a year later when Warrior was unraveling because he was an idiot. And yeah, I recognize that he was a draw and he was somebody that was a moment in time and was a great character for a brief moment in time. But that's just it right there. Now Savage losing at Mania 5 did complete the story, sort of, kind of, because then by Mania 6, Savage was working in a mixed tag match. And that was fucking stupid. And then he won the title from Ric Flair at Mania 8. But the thing is tell me that any of those scenarios wouldn't have worked better than Hogan losing it, or than Hogan, winning it at Mania 5. Because I'm sorry, but I just think that you could have had it years earlier than Triple H becoming champion and walking out, as first ever heel to close the show as champion. Would have been Yokozuna, but oh look, Hulk Hogan came in again. So that's really all I have to say right there. That's about it. Those are some scenarios, and that's just a bit of an idea as to what could have possibly happened. That being said, let me know your scenarios in the comments, please. Do you think that Randy Savage could have and should have had a longer run than 371 days? Because to be perfectly honest, a 2-year run would have been perfect for Savage, because Savage was somebody that absolutely 100% was great for the company. And it's not like Hogan could have gotten any more over than he already was. Agree, disagree, what I said? Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.